Feeling bright like a sunshine.
Finally got this thing in here. So it's sitting in its final location, and got it all aligned and straight and exactly where I wanted it. I measured out exactly 20 feet of clearance. I've actually got about 25, but I made sure I had about 20 feet out that way so that we could feed this thing with a 20-foot stick without having any problems. And then out that way, I think I might be shy of 20, but I don't see myself needing to go out that far out the other direction. So we should be fine. And as I discussed earlier, there is nowhere on this piece of equipment for you to be able to lift it, either with a forklift, because you could see underneath that there's not much space underneath that. You've got maybe like a ½ inch underneath there for you to get some forks under. And also there's no lifting eye on this thing. So it was real crazy trying to get this thing off the pallet and get it into position. Eventually I basically just had to lower it as low as I can, pull the forks completely out, let it drop down, and then I use the forklift to kind of slide it into position. So I would have to say for this model, I don't know how all the other models are, but for this model, HydMech gets a F- for portability. So this has probably been one of the worst machines I've ever had to unload, move into place, and just not have any options to grab this thing. Earlier you could see that the straps I had around these edges, these corners, and it worked out okay. It didn't position, it didn't counterbalance the saw. It was real lopsided, and also, I just didn't like putting that much tension on certain places that aren't designed to have tension put on them. Like for instance, one of those straps was right across this work stop bar. So you're putting a lot of tension on that bar, and I'm sure it's fine. I'm sure it can handle it, but it's not designed to do that. So, and then the weight of this thing, I believe it weighs about 2,000 pounds. But it's just very awkward. There's not a good center on it. So if, you know, even like right here where you've got this cast table, if they would have put some lifting eyes somewhere around the bulk of this, maybe right here, somewhere in there, just a couple lifting eyes, something, anything to help you lift this thing up. And then also just make it a little bit more accessible to get a forklift underneath it. So you can see that right there. There is nothing. You can't get under that. You've got a wedge, get a wedge shoved under there, get a lip, and then try and pry it up so that you can get underneath it. So I think all in all, we probably spent about 2, maybe even 3 hours just trying to get this thing in position. And I ran out of time yesterday to get this thing wired up. I also didn't have the right wire, so I just called it a day and got the right wire today. Here it is. We're gonna be wiring this thing up, and we're gonna be making its first cut. So here's the junction box for the wiring. And something that kind of caught me off guard was how thin this wire is. You know, with this being a 3-phase saw, I figured this might be a little bit thicker wire, but it's not. So I got, I believe I got 14 gauge, and this even looks like it may be just a little bit thinner, but it should be fine. The other thing I don't like is that there's not a neat way to wire this. So you can see this wire goes back inside the machine, but they don't give you another outlet to wire to power from the back, or even like a hole that I can't see to run your cords through. And there's the junction box there. So my first thought was running through this little corner section here and out the back right here. That would probably be the easiest way, but I really don't want to do that because it doesn't look good. Plus, with that cord being under there, you can get some coolant splashed on it and maybe some chips falling on it. It's just not ideal. So I think what I'm going to do is I might take this box off and see how that wire is ran through there and just kind of follow it back, because this wire goes back to the motor. And I also don't like the fact that they put this box up front. Everybody knows that you wire from the back of a machine. There's no need to wire from the front of the machine. So I don't know why they would put it there. Maybe ease of access, I'm not sure. But so we are going to get this stuff ran through the machine and get this thing wired up, and we will make our first cut. Okay, so I've got the cable ran all the way through. You can see I took out the junction box here, and they do have a hole with a grommet, and I just followed this wire here that goes back to the motor. And in order to do that, so you can see this other hole. So I think the way it's designed is they expect you to come in under here and just go right in through, and you don't have to deal with anything on the inside. Just a power cord here. You run the power cord when it comes down, but then after it comes down, then what do you do with it? So do you want it hanging around your front of your machine, just kind of all over the place? I don't think so. So to get inside the machine, I had to take off this access cover, and I had about 8 bolts on it, so that was a little bit of a pain. And followed this line right in through here, and then there's another wall right here, but there is an access hole up in the corner that allows all those wires to go through, and then over here there's nothing. So there's a tiny one there, tiny access hole there, but you have the coolant pan on the other side. So I went to the other side of the machine, pulled out the coolant pan right there, and I don't know if you can see all the way up in there, but you gotta get down low. You had to go way up underneath in there and pull that cord through, and there is a cable track along the machine. So I followed that cable track, and then around the back, I don't know if you can see it, there was an outlet, not for the cable. So the outlet for all the wires and stuff, they go inside this nice and neat cover here. And you can see how they come out the back of the machine, but I can't go through that hole because it's taken up by this cover, and this cover goes to the saw. So what I had to do is go through the access port for the coolant hose, and that port, it runs alongside of it, but there is no grommet just to protect the wire. But it's a really big hole, and I don't see it chafing really at all. So you can tell that it's not designed for that, but it did work out pretty well for it to run from the front of the machine to the back of the machine, and then come out the back side and up along the wall here, and then go to my cutoff box. So got everything ran through. That's the hard part. Now I can get it wired up. So I would give HydMech a D- for wiring. So the reason why I say a D- is because it is possible. It does look nice. It looks professional, but it's a lot of work, and it's a real pain in the butt to fish that wire all the way from the front to the back of the machine and then wire it up neatly. So those are the two areas that I'm seeing right now that they need to improve on. How you're able to move this machine and how you're able to power this machine right out of the crate. So hopefully they're gonna blow me away with their cutting ability. Still waiting on it. I still love the machine, just the fit, finish, and design, and the fabrication of the machine. But getting this thing in the shop and up and running has been a pain so far. All right, I'm gonna get this together and then I'll come back. Okay, let's go ahead and engage the feed. So we will engage the head. Let's start at 0. So it shouldn't move. When we engage the head, no movement. Then I'll move it to 3. And we should have some movement. And I'll increase. And then once it drops all the way, it should stop. So there you go. It looks like we got just a little bit of the metal here. And that adjustment can be made with this thing. This is what actually tells the saw to cut off, and by adjusting this here you can change when that saw actually does cut off. But since that's the first time I've dropped this thing all the way down, you can see that it did cut into this base just a little tiny bit, which that's gonna happen. That's gonna cut through as deep as it needs to, and that'll be it. Once it cuts through, it'll kind of have a little guideway for it, and then that'll be the end of that. Okay, well, I think that's it. I'm pretty happy with this thing so far. Just by the control panel and the build and the quality of it. We're gonna make some cuts on this thing and see how it does. But other than the portability and the wiring, I think this is gonna be a great saw for the shop. One of the main reasons I picked this saw was because of this control panel. So this control panel can move anywhere you want around the saw, and I will most likely have it over on this side with the head facing towards the cutting blade, just like that. And the reason why I like that is because it keeps you far enough away from the material and the blade and everything, but still in a good line of sight and easy access to maneuver or adjust anything you need to. When you step up from the S20's, kind of like I don't want to say bottom of the line, but it's the first option, it's the first setup for the S model. This is a manual model. When you go up to the next model, which is a semi-automatic, and then the next model above that, which is a fully automatic, what they do is they end up putting the control panel over here, and it's not adjustable. It's stuck right here behind the machine. And which that's okay if you're cutting things that are only about 3 or 4 feet long, but sometimes I have to make cuts 6 and 7 and 8 feet long in material. And so if I'm over here operating the machine from this back corner, I've got to then turn around. I've got to walk completely around the bar stock or whatever it is, square tubing, and then back over to this side of the machine if I want to be around the machine, or if I just need to go grab something for whatever reason. And so to me, that was just a bad setup. There's a lot of machines that way. I don't really care for it. I don't like it. And also it kind of puts you in a corner. You're going to be back here operating right here in the corner between the machine and the wall. And everybody knows that if anything goes wrong, or if you have something going wrong with your equipment, you do not want to be pinned in the corner. You want an exit strategy. You want an exit plan. And then furthermore, if you do have a long piece of stock coming out, now you're surrounded in 3 different areas, and the only one-way direction you have is straight back. So I really like this setup where it's out front, easy access, and it gives you a good egress if you got to get away from the machine for whatever reason. They do not sell semi or automatics machines with the controls up here. So one of the adjustments I might make in the future is adding an actual hydraulic piston here. So what the air cylinder will allow us to do is to either automatically or semi-automatically lift the cutting head whenever the cut is complete. So I don't know how or when or if I'm going to do it, but it's something I would like to do. The head on this is not that heavy. It does have a counterbalance. It has a counter springs back here, so it's not really that bad. But once you start getting it way up there, it does get a little heavy. And I think it would just be nice to be able to push a button or a toggle switch right here on the machine and be able to lift this whole thing up and get it ready for a new piece of stock. So we'll see. I'm going to mess around with this thing, and later on down the road, we'll see what kind of adjustments and modifications we want to make to suit our needs. Okay, with that, let's get our first cut on this thing. All right, we got everything wired up, and this is our first cut. That's it. I think she's a keeper.